But just to start us off, I wanted to ask you guys, what conversations do you hope are started in homes across Houston after today?
Wants to go first?
Anybody?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Belinda.
I was going to say my hope is that people will have conversations with children, because a lot of times the question is, should I talk to my children about what's going on? And my hope is that people will use the Beatitudes and be bold, be honest, and be affirmative. And when I say be bold, have the conversation. Silence solves nothing. So just have the conversation.
Yes, and I agree with Belinda. I believe that we need to have those bold, direct conversations, allow our kids and friends and family to ask those hard questions. If we don't know the answer, there are ways to finding out the answer, going doing a little bit of research and bringing it back to them. I had to have those hard conversations with my kids this week, and they're young, and it was uncomfortable. And I want to keep my children as innocent as long as I possibly can, but unfortunately, I can't. I'm not afforded that luxury of keeping them innocent right now. I mean, there's so much going on, and my children are of color, and they see it, they ask questions, so we try to answer those questions as honestly as we can.
For me, I would hope that the conversations are at least honest, that we take some time to reflect and think on how we got here, and also be intent on what kind of world we want to see in the future, and that we begin to move in that direction as individuals and collectively. Because I hear a lot of talk about making America better, brighter, bigger, bolder, but it's kind of like talking left and walking right. So you can't have the things that we espouse to have if we keep going down and making the same unfortunate mistakes time and time again. And so I personally am hoping that that this is some kind of moment that allows us to pivot to a new normal in the midst of a pandemic, to also think about what that means for us and as a country and as humans as a whole.
Dawnalee, you mentioned this week you actually had those conversations with your kids. How did you start the conversation?
It actually started because my husband and I were watching the news and seeing what was going on, and my kids happened to be sitting there eating their dinner, and they asked, what is going on? Why is that man on the ground like that? Why does the police have his knee in the back of this man's neck? And that just kind of opened up the opportunity for us to have that conversation. We got a chance to answer those questions. And it's funny because my son is actually learning about the Bill of Rights last week. And so I was able to tie in that with our conversation and try to make a connection there for him to where it would make sense with something that he was already learning. But the questions came rolling in from both my son and my daughter. And we as parents, we just had to suck it up kind of and just go for it. I mean, we felt really uncomfortable at first trying to censor what we were saying to our kids. And then it was like, kind of like, I can't censor this anymore. Like it's so much in their, it's so in their face, it's so blatant. So my answers have to be very direct, very honest with them about what is going on and what kind of change we would love to see, and what kind of world I want my kids to grow up in.
Very good points. And I was going to say, I was going to piggyback off of what she was saying, because you have to explain without scaring them. And so I have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a soon-to-be 11-year-old. And you really have to make it age appropriate for them, but you have to bring up those scenarios. So my 3-year-old Black young man wants to be a cop. So of course, this is a conversation every time. He's still saying he wants to be a cop. So I have to explain to him that on his level, that everybody's different and sometimes people make bad choices. Now I have a 5-year-old, so I can explain to her that you do have some cops that may make a bad choice or make a bad decision, and they have consequences for that. And then sometimes the consequences aren't fair.
Well, the interesting thing about it, as I heard Belinda saying earlier, I hope that some of the conversations have been going on already. For me, growing up, The conversation started very early. And for my children, we've been talking about race for years, and they're only 9, 7, and 2. So race is a conversation that needs to be ongoing and not just something that happens when something big happens in the world. But in terms of launching into a new conversation, what I did at my church, I'm the associate pastor at Bellaire United Methodist Church, is develop a system to systematically talk to your family, to your children about race and about racism, about oppression, about social injustice. And you could do it in bite-sized ways that would be not too intimidating, by using a prayer model. For many people in the Christian faith, we're familiar with the ACTS prayer model, ACTS, acknowledge, confess, thanksgiving, and supplication. So what I did was just change the S. So the A is still acknowledge, and that's acknowledge that race is a problem and it's real, and confess to your children, hey, this is the racism that I've either experienced in my life, or I have either been a victim of or been the offender. Just confess, just say, I've done it, it's real, I'm sorry. And T is thank your children. Be thankful that they're willing to talk to you, and be thankful for the people who've come before us in the movement and the civil rights movement, which is still going on, and name those persons. And finally, the S is to stay committed to the cause, stay committed to communicating no matter what. If the world seems peaceful to you in your world, it's not necessarily peaceful everywhere in the world. So make sure you stay connected to the community, join organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, and make sure your children are aware that these are things that they can be a part of.
Thanks, Lataya. That's really awesome to hear that application. Terence, what about you? You know, I know you were telling me about your story a little bit on the phone, and I know you work with so many different people in the community. You know, what are your thoughts?
So kind of to piggyback on Belinda's statement about third grade, I didn't find out I was Black until I was in third grade, because my mom, she didn't we didn't have the race talk about growing up that I was Black. Her biggest thing was go to school, get a good education, work hard. And so one day we were sitting in class, and one of my classmates, you know, another African-American young female said, you know, and that's why you're Black. I'm thinking, well, I'm not Black. And she's like, oh, yes, you are. And I'm like, no, I'm not Black. And she said, you're Black, you're Black. And so I just started boo-hooing and bawling because I didn't want to be Black, because to me, the black crayon represented like darkness and oil, and I'm like, no, I'm brown. And so of course the teacher stops and it's like, well, hey, what's going on? She ends up getting you know, referrals to the office, but she did pull me to the side and say, we are considered Black African American. You should be proud of, you know, who you are and what that means. And I still had no mental reference of what that, you know, meant. But it wasn't until years later, when I was in high school, getting ready to kind of go out. I just got my permit and license or what have you. And before I got to get on the road by myself for the first time, we did have to have the conversation of what that meant when the police would pull you over eventually, because this is their job. And if you are caught speeding, here's how to handle that. And I still remember, you know, put both hands 10 and 2. And when they ask you for your license, registration, everything is yes, sir, no, sir. You look over to them if they want to see your registration and your documents. Look over to the window and say, it's in my glove compartment. May I reach for them? And then you would open the glove compartment slowly. And then before you just reach in, you would open and then allow them to look and see that nothing is there. Reach in, grab, hand it over to the officer, because at that point it was all about, you know, my parents wanting to see me to come home. You know, growing up, my mom married a military guy, and we began to move throughout, you know, Texas and eventually to Florida, where on the military base, you really don't have time to figure out who's Black, who's white. You're kids, and you go to school together. In 3 months, you know, another family could be moving in or moving out, and you really didn't have time to figure out what you didn't like about each other, but you kind of just came together and hung out and became friends because you all were sharing a common experience, to where You know, I had friends that were, you know, female, friends that were male, you know, Caucasian friends, Hispanic friends, and some of my best friends at the time happened to be people that were non-Black. And so that taught me that, you know, like, again, like you all are stating, that the world has good people come in all shapes and sizes and colors. You know, no one is better than the other or more or different, but we're all here and everyone wants to be loved, supported, and cared for. And if you could just focus on being a good person, everything else will take care of itself.
When people look at the crowds of people that marched in downtown Houston, especially for the kids and the families, seeing those pictures, what do you hope they take from that?
For me, I hope that people take some affirmation, especially people of color, Black people, because we see outside races becoming allies. You see that in these marches. You see a diversity within the crowd, and I hope that that's reaffirming. And as parents, you know, when we're talking to our kids, we have to affirm them as well. And so we have to tell them, you know, they're beautiful, they're wise, they're strong, they are children of God. We have to give them those foundations so that when they go out in the world, as Terence mentioned, and they face an incident, that they know that they are still a person of value. That when they see these images with us watching the news, that doesn't discourage them from being who they are. They can still rock their natural hair. They can still do whatever they want. They can become whoever they want. We have to affirm our children. And I'm hoping that when they see the plethora and the diversity of people that are out there supporting racial justice, going against police brutality, that they are affirmed in who they are, that they are doing the right thing, they're standing for the right thing. You also have the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, with my older child, she sees sometimes the violent scenes, she sees the rioting, bless you, she sees the rioting and the looting. We talk about that too. And so I'm hoping with the older kids that we talk about leadership, what that means to be a leader and bring people together, what that means to be a leader and bring unity and calm down division, calm down fears, and bring people together. And she's into that political arena already, that public sphere. You know, she ran for student council. So I'm hoping some of our older children see that as well. They see that they can be an ally. They see that they can run for office. They can make a difference, and what leadership means and why it's needed, and know, because they're seeing the absence of leadership. So hopefully they'll see what leadership really means.
Hoping that my children take away from seeing all the protests and rioting, particularly the protests, that there is still hope for change. I'm hoping that when they see it and they see all these people of different backgrounds, different colors coming together for the same purpose, that they get some sense of, oh my gosh, things are going to change. And at least, as for parents as well, I want to take away from it the peace of knowing that hopefully when all of this is over, that the things that need to change within our police system, that they actually do change, and that we feel comfortable about putting our son or our daughter in a car when they're ready, you know, old enough to drive, and feeling, okay, if they do get pulled over by the cop, I don't have to worry if it's going to turn into something negative. Like, I want from this that we still have hope for change, and that actually change comes about.
For me, it was really to be able to put into words that the civil rights movement is still going on, that racism is not yesterday's problem, that it is an ongoing problem, and many people are aware of it and recognizing it. And so to see the protests, to see the marches, to see people coming together of all races, to see all that's happening in the world, it gives me hope as well. But it just helps to bring awareness that this is not yesterday's problem, that this is today's problem, which means it's tomorrow's problem, and it's not going away overnight. And so we can't hold hands and make it go away. We can't sing Kumbaya and make it go away. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort. It's going to take more than one workshop or this conversation for people to get it. This is just one step on the journey, but the journey is going to be long. It's been going on. It's a hard journey, and it will continue. So I'm glad that more people are on the journey together with us. That's what those protests and seeing so many people out there shows me. And I can tell my children, when I say the civil rights movement is still going on, this is what I mean. Look out there. This is what I'm talking about. And they get excited about it. They get scared too, but it's a blessing because it's a step. It's a step on the journey.
For me, I mean, to piggyback off what Ms. Simpson was saying, I think that that she's right, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. I believe that, all of us as Americans, good, bad, or indifferent, have become complacent with other people being able to take care of certain things. Much like when we go to a restaurant, you have a waiter to, get up and to place your order, to bring your food, to serve you. We've become accustomed to outsourcing the problems and our solutions to other people. And so if we could I'm taking away from the protest today that it is multi-generational, and it is still relationship based. The people out there that are protesting have a connection to the cause or to other people that have been impacted by that, and that this is not a Black problem. This is not a white problem. This is our problem. And the more that we can make it the tent larger around what we, the people, the collective we, want to see in the world, the more progress that we will continue to make. Because I believe for too long, we again have sat back on the couch in our safe spaces and said what other people should be doing. And so I'm hopeful that that this year that people will begin to take action into their own hands the right way, to really think hard and long about the solutions, because as Ms. Simpson said, this problem is not going away tomorrow. It is not going away next year. It is something that we must be vigilant about day in and day out to guard against it, because again, it's kind of like the school shooting epidemic that we see in the country, that everyone, wants to gather around and do something about it. And then 6 months goes by, and then to another one. And then it's kind of the same parallel to where you look at it as America's problem with violence. And as we become a much more of a multi-generational and multi-ethnic country, that, people are making the decision for other people that you don't deserve to live based on you being different than who I am or who that individual was. And so if we can kind of think long and hard and really examine our hearts and minds for our own personal biases, our own personal prejudices, and begin to make connections with people who are different, ethnically, racially, economically, professionally, the other in our lives. If we can run towards that and really work towards building those relationships, I ultimately believe that will be the cure for racism and ignorance to end in the country.